Hello, this is Teen Stock Politics, and welcome back to this week's news. Today we'll be focusing on only one subject and one subject only, and that will be the problems going on in Afghanistan with President Biden that did a withdrawal of many troops, American troops coming out of Afghanistan, and the Taliban did take over a few days ago. So this is a very major topic, and that's why we're going to specifically focus on that subject this week. Yes, other things did happen this week, however, not as big. And since Afghanistan is such a large topic, it does deserve its own episode on its own. And today I'm joined by Sam, my normal co host.
Hello.
And we also got new microphones, so hopefully the audio is quite significantly better. Anyways, we're going to jump in and we're going to talk about exactly what happened in the timeline that led up to the takeover by the Taliban. And this really goes back to when, we're going to go back into the trade deal with Trump. And this, not trade deal, just an agreement. And basically what happened was Trump and the Taliban signed an agreement that set the terms of a U.S. withdrawal by May 1st, 2021. And this was back in February 29th, 2020. So this was before COVID, anything like that happened. And this is one of Biden's big criticisms, deflection, if that makes any sense. Basically, when they're like, okay, why did you decide to withdraw now? Because his original goal was get out by 9/11, so September 11th. So he decided to do it before then, which would have, of course, been August. I don't remember the exact date, but it was in August. And he said, well, Trump already had this deadline, and we missed the deadline. It was way past May 1st before the withdrawal happened. So they thought so the Taliban has already, we've already broken that agreement with the Taliban, so he wants to get it done as quickly as possible, which isn't really a valid criticism because Biden can still change that date because he is the president, so he could change the date and he chose not to. He still got it late because he got it way after May the 1st, 2021. However, he did eventually do it, and this was to the benefit of the Taliban. And it could have possibly been to the benefit of many of the American soldiers that no longer have to risk their lives in Afghanistan to fight and protect the country of Afghanistan, representing the U.S. So it's just depending on where you lie. Do you think that Biden really should have moved that deadline?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, like I said, he did miss the deadline, but do you think he really should have just waited? And he missed the deadline already, just don't do it at all. His intelligence told him that, yes, the Taliban was going to take over Afghanistan, but not in 11 days like it did in real life. He took over the group. The Taliban took over the capital really quickly.
With the information presented to President Biden, his choice makes sense. It's either, though it's unfortunate, it would either have he was told that he could either continue fighting this bloody war in Afghanistan for a few more months before the withdrawal, or try to rush the evacuation and get as many troops out there as possible. But I don't think the DoD and other sources could predict the speed that the Taliban would enter major hubs of Afghanistan. And so I think President Biden may have President Biden and the Department of Defense may rushed it a bit because I don't think they personally knew the speed and battle hardened troops that are the Taliban fighters and the way and their resources after so many years of bloody conflict that they could continue moving at this speed towards these major hubs, also airports, which we'll be talking about later.
Right, and if we move on with our timeline, this basically the big thing was when Biden finally followed in, and he made a campaign promise back in February 19th, right before the inauguration. And this was a campaign promise, so this was right before he was inaugurated, saying that my administration strongly supports the diplomatic process that's underway into bringing an end to this war that is closing out 20 years. We remain committed to ensuring that Afghanistan never ever provides a base for terrorist attacks against the United States and our partners and our interests. So this was his campaign promise. He said he was going to get troops after Afghanistan, and that was a very popular idea. But after he's actually done the deed, it's not so popular anymore.
No one really expected, as we were saying, the speed of these battle-hardened Taliban troops
Right.
rushing into these major hubs and what chaos they could cause.
Like, I think this is the biggest, or basically the first major slip up of the Biden administration. Of course, he's had criticisms about the border crisis, but none as big as the mess up in Afghanistan. Like Sam said, I do understand why he chose to withdraw the troops, but did not have a plan to get all Afghanistans that helped the United States out, that have green cards, that are allowed to leave the country, and the Taliban aren't letting them in the airports to leave the country, not let other Americans leave the country. Basically, I saw Fox News actually describe them as hostages within Afghanistan. So for him not to have a plan, President Biden not to have a plan, I think that's a big criticism we can have. Regardless of whether or not you think Biden did the right thing by moving these troops back into the United States, no matter what you think, he should have had a plan of how he was going to get everybody out, that whether it was Afghanistans that were native to the country that helped the United States, which they would be, I guess, considered traitors to the Taliban, because they were enemies, of course, and then, of course, other Americans that were left there at the airports trying to get on a plane and were unsuccessful. And then Sam was talking about the airports just a few minutes ago, and there's one side of the airport where they call it just orderly fashion. Of course, it's not really. It's basically all the military planes leaving with all the American troops, and on the other side, that's where all the civilians are. It is chaos. There was a plane that had hundreds and hundreds of people on it when it was only supposed to fit like 100 people. And the pilot refused to fly it because it was way too heavy and way too crowded to anything safely to get in the air and then fly. And all these citizens are trying to get out of the country, avoid the Taliban, trying to get out of the rule of the Taliban, but it's not working for them, because the Americans don't have a plan. And even if they have a passport, a green card to go into the United States, they can't. The Taliban is not letting them leave the country. Other Americans from like the western side of the world, for example, like the CNN crew right now, I don't remember her name, but she's the chief international correspondent. She's there right now. She can leave if she wants because she's white, and they can tell that she's part of the Western world. She's not native from Afghanistan. You can tell by the color of her skin, it's just something that the Taliban takes to fruition when they're deciding who they're allowed to let out of the country. So she can leave if she wants, but all the other just citizens in Afghanistan can't leave, regardless of their status in terms of passports and green cards. So the Taliban's really going to have to look at this, and if they do end up, which they probably will, being the main government in Afghanistan, having to go on the world stage and communicate with other countries, they're going to have to change this, right?
Definitely. And it's very unfortunate, the situation that these citizens must be in, though the Taliban is still kind of unorganized in their ways, despite their massive speed. So it's very confusing for both the Taliban, who should they let out, as you were saying. There's some rough guidelines on who has the permissions to let out, and they have to stay in. And so you were saying how chaotic it must be for the people at the airports, but it also is extremely chaotic for the Taliban, and that's probably what's causing so much confusion among the entire country, and what's causing so much backlash for President Biden.
Right.
The sheer amount of confusion has probably never been seen before, and in recent history, like besides maybe the withdrawal from Vietnam, nothing to this scale has happened before.
And there's another thing I want to mention, because yes, Biden was the one that officially initiated the process of getting the American troops out of Afghanistan. But I think there's a lot of blame to go around with former administrations. For example, Trump, like I said, he striked a deal with the Taliban saying they were going to be out by May the 1st. Obama also had a promise that he was also going to get troops out of Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. He ended up putting more there. So there is blame to go around. Mm-hmm. And even in only a few months ago, on June 26th, after Trump had left office, in a rally in Ohio, this is his first rally since leaving office, Trump did say that Biden couldn't stop the process of removing troops from Afghanistan, and he had not acknowledged that the Afghan government wouldn't last once the U.S. troops had left, and the Taliban would take over. And I quote, "I started the process," Trump says. "All the troops are coming back home." Mm-hmm. So he's admitting that, yes, he started the process. A lot of Trump supporters that are the defense of Trump on more conservative media that I've seen are saying, well, if Trump had followed through with this, if he had won that election, he would have had a plan to make sure the Taliban wouldn't just take over the country completely, and have a plan to get other Afghanistan citizens that help the United States military and also other Americans out of Afghanistan.
Well, yeah, and this is a big, lucky steal for former President Trump. If he was not able to, if Biden pulled this off extremely successfully, then nothing would have happened. But because of it appears to be faulty DoD information and the unexpected sheer will of and speed of these Taliban fighters, then then Biden, well, then the situation could have turned out a lot different for President Biden. And so it's just a very, very lucky steal for President Trump with this, with the speed of the Taliban. And as we know from major history, especially during the Germans in World War II, if you don't have an organized, very speedy force, it could lead to all this confusion and what Andrew was saying in the airports, which is just putting even more blame on Biden, and it's just really just an insurmountable embarrassment for Joe Biden, even though it probably wasn't entirely his fault. And so, as we were saying, it's just really a lucky steal for former President Trump, who's still trying to take the credit for it, which he did initiate. But
and there was an interview, I think it was on ABC, with George Stephanopoulos. I think this came out either this morning or Thursday morning or on Wednesday. But basically, Biden was basically defending his decision, which he's really, because obviously there was a lot that went wrong. Mm-hmm. And he said, Biden, in this interview with or ABC, I think, was it ABC, NBC? It was one of those two networks. Basically, he wouldn't change a thing about how he dealt with withdrawing troops from Afghanistan. And this really goes back to his campaign promise, saying, if I make a mistake, every president does, he would be straightforward with the American public. And I don't really think he's done that in this situation. Mm-hmm. He's obviously made a mistake. We can see that by what's happened in Afghanistan, mm-hmm. but he's trying to deflect what he said about it. He's deflecting the blame, saying, this my Secretary of State said it was going to be okay. My intelligence that I've gotten said this wouldn't have happened.
The issue is here for the American people, and for us, is who do we trust here? It's do we trust that Biden was right about faulty intelligence, or do we trust the fact that Biden made a slip up and tried to rush a political victory for the Democrats? And we just still don't know which, but Biden either way is not being, as you said, incredibly straightforward with his process. He's kind of being a bit confusing, especially to the American people, about what he's trying to convey. Was it his fault? Whose fault was it? It's your team, your administration slipped up, and you failed to communicate, and so It's either way you did something wrong, but you gotta own up to it. And if you want to keep your career, if you want to keep your campaign promise of telling the truth.
Well, I think, like you said, he's breaking this campaign promise already, and this is going to be a major downfall to Democrats in 2022. Already, polls have shown a stark way to the right in terms of Republican vote in the polls for the midterms, where we were supposed to pick up 2 seats from the polls originally. That is not the case anymore. Republicans are going to use this in their campaign ads, saying, look at what Democrats have done in the White House. They've completely destroyed our support in Afghanistan. They let a country fall to the Taliban. And you look at this and you say, well, that is a fair argument. It was Democrats that were in control of literally everything except the Supreme Court, because of course they have a conservative majority. They have Congress, they have all of Congress, the Senate in the House, and they have the presidency, and this is what happened under their control. Of course, it's not necessarily their 100% fault. Republicans have a big part in this as well, but you cannot ignore the fact that yes, this happened under a Democrat presidency, and he made the final decision to withdraw troops. Of course, like I said before, he could have stopped this timeline and said, okay, yes, Trump promised the Taliban that we would be out by May the 1st. That didn't even happen. And they could have said, okay, we're going to keep the troops in. Yep. Another thing that Biden has said as his defense, I guess you could say, deflecting criticism, is basically the president would have to do it. There was no good time to let American troops out of Afghanistan. Whether it was 15 years ago, it wasn't a good time. 15 years from today, it wouldn't have been a good time. There's no good time to let American troops out of Afghanistan. The Taliban taking over Afghanistan was basically inedible.
Yeah. So from my view and perspective as a teenager in America watching this unfold, especially in an unbiased perspective, it looks like Republicans had more of a head-on plan, with more of a direct plan, while the Democrats, especially between Obama and Biden, weren't so sure about what they were doing. Like especially to the minuscule and to the major level, like when will they withdraw? How soon will it like who will we prioritize in the withdraw? I feel like a lot of the stuff was changed around from Obama to Biden and from Trump to Biden. If we wanted this withdrawal to succeed, we had to go with one plan, whether that benefited conservatives or if it benefited Democrats.
Well, I think just in general, every American doesn't want us in Afghanistan. They are worried about the consequences of not us of us. They're worried of the consequences of America not being in Afghanistan. But the thought of us maintaining our presence in Afghanistan isn't a good look. Yeah. And I don't think any American, conservative or progressive, they don't like that. And you mentioned how whether it was a liberal or conservative viewpoint and how the plan's going to lay out, I don't think there was really that.
Here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say all parties wanted the troops out of Afghanistan. But the way they went about that was disappointingly from both parties more of a political thing. And the political thing was whether whether the ways to get these troops out of Afghanistan, and a lot of these people were fighting to present their plan to the White House. And when it came about turn, when we finally solidified the date would be during Biden's presidency, with Biden not moving back the date, it failed because of this entirely. I mean, a lot of stuff, as we know, has been leading up to this withdrawal. Almost, as you were saying, 15 years of progress. And as we know, in 15 years, there's been multiple presidents and multiple parties in the White House. And we need to understand that the plan is so partisan about who gets to take the credit for getting the troops out of Afghanistan that the parties, I don't think, were able to cooperate, which led to this extreme confusion and overall a extreme embarrassment for Biden and his administration, and extreme success for Trump.
I actually disagree with you on actually a lot of that because we don't even know what the Republicans were going to do. They say they had a plan, but it was never laid out. When they made that agreement saying that the Taliban, or with the Taliban saying that they were going to withdraw troops from Afghanistan, they didn't lay out a plan. They didn't have a plan.
That's the exact point. They didn't lay out a plan. They wanted to take the credit for themselves, and that's exactly what the Democrats did too. I mean, sure, they laid out their plan, but they only did, whether or not you'd like to believe this was intentional or just timing. Though they laid out the plan, it was when soon enough where Biden was in office and when they were scheduled to, and then when the date was scheduled for the withdrawal.
I don't see that viewpoint because yes, I guess you want to have that credit of, okay, I was the president that withdrew it, but if you don't have a plan in the first place, Democrats had a plan that they laid out. It did not work as they planned. Mm-hmm. They thought, oh, the Taliban, they're going to take over eventually, not in 11 days. We're going to have some leeway to say, oh, Biden did a good thing, and eventually the Taliban, or the Afghanistan would fall to the Taliban.
Yeah, and this is what I'm saying. Since the Republicans weren't either they weren't cooperating with the Democrats or they didn't just want to lay out their plan entirely, they still get to take credit for it. And so that's why this thing is so partisan, is because nobody wants to help the other side, whether it be intentional or unintentional. Nobody's going to lay out support because of how partisan it is.
Well, it was all a decision by the president. Republicans had no dealing in this. That's the criticism.
The administrations.
It was all the administration.
That's what I'm saying.
And they're all Democrats.
In the previous administration.
The previous administration, yes, they wanted.
Since the previous administration didn't lay out their plans, and they didn't cooperate or give any resources to the from past intelligence, from and past kind of thoughts by the Trump administration about their plans to withdraw, then they don't have to take the blame for the massive flip-flop that was the withdrawal.
No, but they made that agreement before he knew he was not going to get a second term.
It's not about the agreement, it's about the plans to withdraw.
No, but they set that date line.
This is not about the date. It's about all of these minor details that led into the withdrawal.
Yes, there are minor details, but just let me speak real quick. So you have Trump here. Mm-hmm. He sets this deadline, right? He doesn't know if he's going to get a second term. He might get to that deadline. He might still be president. He doesn't know. Mm-hmm. He doesn't lay out a plan. Of course, he still has over a year to figure out what he's going to do. Yep. Right? Because I think it's April 1st? No, May 1st.
He doesn't publish a plan. We don't know if he was thinking of one or not.
But the reason I don't think it's about credit is because no one actually wanted to do that because they know that the Taliban is going to fall, Afghanistan is going to fall to the Taliban.
Yeah, but no one knew about this massive flip-flop either way. Trump didn't, Biden didn't.
Republicans, well, they knew it was going to flip-flop eventually.
Yeah, but they didn't know to this level. They didn't know that the Taliban would take over in just 11 days.
Regardless, it doesn't matter how long it's going to take, it's going to happen eventually, and that's what they knew. But they didn't want to have that criticism, either politicians, whether
Obviously.
It's Trump or Biden.
Obviously.
And if Trump had gone through his presidency, he had already been there for 4 years. He probably would have made it to that deadline of May 1st, and he would have taken that criticism. So that's why I don't think it's a partisan.
We don't know. Well, the thing is, we don't know if it would be such a massive flip flop as it was. We know I agree with you with what you're saying, as it would definitely be a flip flop. Obviously, it would definitely have. I mean, obviously, the Taliban would have eventually taken over, but the extreme confusion among the airports and as we were talking about, and just among the U.S. withdrawal was just so big, so national that it caught the public's attention. And as you were saying, polls have dipped, and Trump, even if we don't know if Trump would have succeeded, if he would have done better or worse than Biden in the withdrawal. And so but since he didn't win the election, then he doesn't have to argue, then he can claim that his plan was better, that he had a better plan, even though we don't even know if he was making up one or not.
You're constantly going back to this idea of going to the airports and the confusion. I don't think I don't know why you're.
Do you think Trump would have done a better or a worse job than Biden?
I
Do you and if you don't know, then that proves my point that Trump has the area to claim that he did better, that he would have done better than Biden.
Well, you can claim whatever you want. It doesn't make it true. The public isn't going to just believe whatever Trump's going to do. Obviously, they didn't, because otherwise he would have been voted in again. He lost that election by a lot. He lost the popular vote by a lot.
Well, yeah, but still, Trump wasn't the one in the Oval Office when this massive flip-flop happened.
And what? He can say all he wants. He's also not in the public eye anymore. He's not the president. Of course, he's the main focus of the Republican Party, but he's not in office right now.
Exactly, that's his point. He doesn't have to take the blame anymore. He doesn't have to do anything. He can just claim. He can just sit back down, claim that his plan was better, and no one will never know, unless he gets reelected.
And another thing that I want to say is I mentioned that Ohio rally too, where he said, I got Biden into this mess. He's claiming himself that he was the reason this happened.
Oh, I forgot about that.
So
that changes the perspective of it.
So I don't really think that the public's going to believe him after he made that statement. Things happen.
That makes sense now. I'm sorry.
And no one wants to take credit because they know it's going to go poorly. And it's not
after the fact.
It's not.
Do you think Trump would like to take credit after the fact? I mean, even though he said, I set Biden up for this.
He can't take credit. You can't take credit for something that you didn't do. Biden was the one that did it. He can't take.
Trump can say he did it, though. That's the thing. He can say he had a plan, even though he didn't publish it.
Then lay out that plan. If people actually want to believe Trump, he needs to say, "Okay, this is what my plan was, and this would have worked better." And he's not going to do that because he didn't ever do a plan. He never drafted a plan, as far as we're aware.
Good point.
So, right. So we'll move on. To when we're talking about women's rights, and this is a big deal because back when they did, Taliban used to have control of Afghanistan before Afghanistan was trying to recover and create a democracy. They let a lot of kids that were girls go to school, and the Taliban have said that they're going to continue letting that happen. However, it's not really confirmed whether or not. I saw a clip from CNN where it was the same correspondent I was talking about earlier had to sleep with the girls and the boys had to sleep somewhere else, which isn't the case in America. It's like required to. And also she asked if the girls went to school and they said no because the Taliban say it's bad. So just in general, and also they can't go to school and get educated. They can go to religious school, but that's basically it. And that doesn't teach you too much, does it? You learn about Islamic law, and that's basically it. Also, another thing they have to do is they have to cover their faces with the hood, and also just their face, except, I guess, the eyes. And this is another thing that men don't have to do. So, just in general, women's rights in Afghanistan is going to take a giant leap backwards because of the Taliban taking over. Yeah. Right?
And the thing is they also tried to cover this up too. They were saying they were going to continue to have these girls go to school when, as because of these CNN correspondents who are so brave to enter the country, they were lying and they didn't get away with it. And so it's even more of an embarrassment to the Taliban and even more an embarrassment to Biden administration for letting this happen, for letting these people violate human rights.
I think time will tell.
Absolutely.
We don't know for sure. The Taliban might follow through with that. The chances of that are slim.
Yeah, because they're not doing it now, and they
didn't do that previously either. Yeah. So we'll really just have to see what happens. Yeah. Well. So I think this basically wraps up this episode. Sam, do you have any lasting thoughts?
That was a good episode. Sorry for the bit of a longer episode. It was in that little debate in the middle.
Right. And also, we're still tinking with the microphone. So if there's any echo or anything, just let us know, and then we'll try to fix up the microphones. So, anyways, thank you for watching. Make sure to tune in on Tuesday. Thank you for watching. Bye.